Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand, and I'm joined by Zach Semke. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great. How are you, Matthew?
Pretty good. And we've also got Ilka Cassidy with us again this week. How are you, Ilka?
I'm doing well as well.
Very good. All right. Well, we've got a great interview, quite a long interview with yourself, Ilka, and Mary, caught up with two architects from Canada. And we talk about some interesting work in Hamilton there, which we're going to get stuck into. But before we do that, we've got some people to thank, Zach.
We do indeed. So a big thank you to our accelerator partner this week, Cassidy Architects, and also our sponsor of the week, Longboard. And so both Cassidy and Longboard are making everything, all of our programming this week possible. Also, thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. Thanks to our champion sponsors, Bowizo, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, and Source 2050.
All right, Ilka, do you want to tell us a little bit about your conversation or who McCallum Sather is and how you came to chat with Matt and Christina?
Sure. So it was actually Mary who met Christina at a conference and saw her present. So she thought she would be a very good candidate for our little exploration into creative approaches to increase the housing supply. So that's how we started talking to them. And we, during the interview, learned about a construction system that is faster and more cost effective. And we learned about mass timber. And they were, through learning about it first, they were actually able to meet the requirements of the Rapid Housing Initiative with those strategies. So it was quite an interesting conversation with them.
All right. Yeah, well, let's get stuck in. This is Christina Boyer and Matt Bolen.
Welcome to the Passive House Accelerator podcast. And Ilka and I are here today with two people from McCallum Sather, Christina Boyer and Matt Bolen, who is managing principal. Christina is an intern architect. And can you please tell us about yourselves and a little bit about your background?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm a licensed architect in the province of Ontario. I've been working for about 15 to 20 years here in particularly the Kitchener-Waterloo region, which is basically Toronto area for anyone outside of this neck of the woods. We've been focused on, or I've been focused primarily on housing of all different scales and types for most of my career, and also specifically high performance design. I recall back it was a number of years ago with passive training and certification specifically, and I was talking to a mentor, a building science guru from this part of the world named Dr. John Straub. He was a thesis supervisor of mine, and at the time I was working in a firm and really trying to figure out how to push the boundaries of high performance design. And I was just asking him about different ways I could look to do that. And we had a really open, transparent conversation about passive house and the pros and cons. And at that time, he said there's really no better high performance education out there, either for experts, professionals, or the general population. So I did decide at that time, this would have been probably 2013, 2014, to go and get certified in passive house. Is very difficult training, more difficult than even definitely certain points of my education and training as an architect. So, but it was very, very informative and influential, I think, in the course that set myself and then our firm on. And one of the great things about it was it actually helped lead to and build a great relationship that we have now and with Christina. So I'll use that as the segue to pass it to you.
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, I'm Christina Boyer. I'm an intern architect, and I joined our team last year as our in-house passive house designer. Growing up in Waterloo and Woolwich Township, we really straddle these two worlds between a community unanimous for innovation and tech startups, but then also we have this rich cultural heritage in farming and old world building craft. And so after I was passing my architecture exams, I was looking at opportunities to be able to meld those two ideas together. And that ended up being mass timber from the craftsmanship and then the high performance with the passive house design. I soon realized that Matt and Mike's practice was a bit of a unicorn in the sense that I couldn't find any other firm to apply to that was pursuing both mass timber and passive house at a multi-res scale. I first met them and through our shared interests in innovations in mass timber. And during that time, we pursued and responded to NRCan's Green Construction Through Wood grant. And that really laid the foundation for pursuits in research and development in innovations in mass timber, and then also collaborations with various stakeholders in the region.
So yeah, it's really, really nice meeting you, and it's really interesting to see and hear what you're doing. And I highly recommend checking out your website because there's a ton of information on your firm and all the projects that you're doing. And the reason we really wanted to talk to you today is because this is a mini series about creative approaches to increasing the housing supply. And that is something that you're really focusing on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, the CMHC, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is our federally backed organization in the country, has this really great diagram that I always point everyone to, and we use it and reference it a lot, about the housing continuum of need, which just looks at all the different types of housing for all the different types of people in our society. And we really like the idea of tackling that in an inclusive way and finding high performance, sustainable, and accessible, inclusive strategies that can solve housing shortages in all of those different areas, but that we can use the same toolkit for all of those different types. Because for us, and in the work with a lot of our not-for-profit and market-related users, we feel as though that's the best way to get the best ingrained use of high performance design and prefabricated design, mass timber, some of these other great tools. So that's generally been our approach, specifically with the not-for-profit and or supportive models, the sort of left side of that housing continuum of need. We've found there's been some really amazing partnerships with groups that have much of the similar interests and motivations that we do. I mean, oftentimes their capital funding is coming from sources, be it government sources or other types of grants. So that's not necessarily their biggest hurdle. And what they're oftentimes thinking about is their operational costs. And so that obviously is a great place to start designing buildings where you're actually really thinking about how to be as efficient as you can and as durable as you can over the long term. The other big thing that's been coming now from some political pressure, obviously just for more housing faster, is we've been able to layer that interest in quality and high performance over the long term with speed of construction, with getting the units to the market and to these users as fast as possible. And that's actually created a pretty rich, fertile area where we've been able to exploit some of our interests in prefabrication and sustainable building strategies at speed with a group of collaborative and like-minded folks to do that. So City Hamilton Housing has been one great organization who's had not only the federal and provincial, but also even the municipal support and funding, driving and pushing on some of the initiatives that they have, such as Passive House, such as Mass Timber. And there's a handful of others. We have one local here, KW Rehabilitation, YW, KW, which is a part of the YWCA organization. So there's been a lot of groups like that who we've had some really great working relationships with in developing housing and that supports that need.
Yeah, and I would just add that these initial investment opportunities really lay the groundwork for providing incentives and an appetite for initiatives such as building with mass timber or pursuing passive house certification, or a high performance building envelope. It was interesting when I first joined to hear that the second round of funding through CMHC was actually announced at we had a multi-phase 2-building multi-res project called YWKW. And at phase 2, that's where they announced an additional $2 billion to build approximately 20,000 homes. And that project's very interesting in the sense that in one calendar year from signing contract to building occupancy, as a team, we were able to deliver that. But zooming out across Canada and kind of looking at it through that lens, my first introduction to CMHC was working in St. John, New Brunswick with St. John Non-for-Profit Housing. They have a project there called the Wellington, which is exemplary in designing an inclusive community that can showcase great design that is also affordable. So these things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And that really laid down the framework in a real world situation to delve into, enter into my career after wrapping up my master's.
Great. There's one particular project that I heard Christina speak about earlier this year that is really, as I understand it, has a particular aim on speeding up delivery of new housing. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. So I think I'm sure you're talking actually about 1620 Main, which is a project in Hamilton for City Hamilton Housing. And what's really, I think, special about that program is, although it is, unique unto itself as a 6-story fully mass timber passive house certified project. It also is really about the stepping stone of we've been building knowledge and experience with, again, our collaborative team and group of like-minded folks who are interested in the same things we are, be it builders and consultants and what have you, and clients. So we started out, the first project we did, which was here in Kitchener, was a 4-story. It was net zero ready in that we had all electric appliances, but frankly, we had to, it was on a very tight timeline. We had pandemic related challenges and issues to deliver the housing the way, that we intended to. But it was a real struggle, but it was mass timber. And that laid the groundwork for a system and a delivery model that we've since been building. And we've built, I guess this is the 1620 Main represents the 4th building we've now, which is almost nearing completion, been able to do on that. And at each iterative building with our team, we've been able to add on a little bit more in the way of either efficiency or high performance or some aspect, or make an adjustment to the program in some way. And so what we've really been able to do is test out a program and a process for delivering this type of high performance housing. And what's so exciting about the 1620 Main project and the ambition of it is the fact that we are, that there was this fundamental need from the client and motivation to pursue passive house certification, which, for us and our team was obviously a challenge, but it makes for, I think, a pretty inspirational project that can act as hopefully a catalyst for more to follow suit.
Each build is kind of like a prototype in the sense that, they're modest in form. They have financial constraints. And so each build, we're pulling one lever at a time. 1620 Main was really built off of multiple successes with previous mass timber projects. And it's able to demonstrate construction efficiencies for prefabrication and its compatibility with high performance building envelopes.
So I'm actually really curious about the evolution of these mass timber buildings, because it's first time is always really hard, right? And you actually don't really want to have a prototype every time you build. You want to learn from one project, just as you said, and implement that in the next one. So how did you start out and where are you now? Like what have you learned along the way? Because I also noticed another project on your website where you're actually building kind of in a hybrid form where you have light framed wall panels, but then mass timber floor and roof, I assume. So is that something like, how is that different from a fully mass timber building, and what are the advantages there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think, prototyping is, especially in the building construction industry, it's, Christina mentioned the particular jurisdiction where we are, there is actually a lot of really great, exciting tech investment in that hardware and software world. And oftentimes, we have conversation with local, people in the tech community who are used to building little widgets. And for them, prototyping is a natural part of the process. For us, when you're talking about very large, expensive real estate endeavors, you can't be affording to get it wrong on a prototype and not have it be something that's going to be, have a long-term life cycle attached to it. So for us, what we've basically done over years and years of being involved in the construction industry is really tried to make sure we have a really strong understanding of conventional delivery models and design of construction, of particularly housing, again, at those various scales and types. And so we have built that portfolio and experience in that world. But then what we have found has allowed us to sort of break through here, as you're describing, is the ability to actually then identify conventional problems and then look for ways that this innovation can help solve those. And that particularly in the case of, as Christina referred to, the GC Wood research development proposal that we submitted back in 2018, which actually was for office prototypes. But it ended up giving us all this information, and we did all of these mock-ups and testing supported by the funding that essentially just put us in a position that when the Rapid Housing Initiative came from CMHC, we were ready to deploy it. And essentially the opportunity for that first project to get done, we had a standardized design. We knew that the design was could go in any option. We understood the restraints of mass timber and how it could be used, but we also understood precast, building structures and stick frame and steel. We had worked in all of those mediums. And so we were able to then, when it came time that there was a supply shortage and that in order to meet the 1 year timeline, it ended up that we had built this relationship with a mass timber supplier who was local, who had just sort of basically got their feet under them and built a local fabrication facility. They were ready to supply, and the supply chain of any other type of structural system wasn't there. So that was a problem in the conventional market, that this knowledge and network and relationships we had built in the mass timber from the office prototype timing was such that we were ready to use that and leverage that opportunity for this first mass timber building. Now, on that building, it was the first of its kind. We wanted to use and not only use, but also expose the mass timber for all its sense of warmth and well-being and biophilic advantages. That was a really key part of the team's goal, was to make sure we did that, to push for the acoustic and fire conformance testing and sign off through the process. And again, in a lot of ways, we designed a very, I would say, austere building that wasn't overly complicated, that didn't try to do things unconventionally in all aspects, but just really tried to focus in on that one thing. We want to do a mass timber building. We want to prove that it's going to be faster than anything else, which we basically did. And the building went up and the superstructure went up in 20 days. And so we were able to leverage that. We have the time-lapse video now that we always go back to with everyone in our network. But then outside of that, we wanted to just make sure that the building was a good quality building that would be a really good and valuable asset to YW and the women battling homelessness that were ultimately moving directly into this building from encampments that were happening around the region. So we had that real driver. And then subsequently, again, with the subsequent buildings, we were trying to tweak and perfect that system. Again, as we mentioned, the Passive House project was this new opportunity where the actual program and the mandate of City Hamilton Housing and the city is such that they are at a political level, driving for Passive House certification. That is an imperative that is so important, obviously, to this type of work. But as you're describing some of the new projects we're working on that are incorporating hybridized solutions of mass timber, stick frame walls, some other things, we have learned that in a ceiling treatment, even in engagement with some of our framing trades, that and fire rating trades and sound, that the floor panels of the mass timber, the CLT specifically, do really, really help in terms of speeding up construction and creating a much, much simpler, cleaner fire rating from floor to floor, which those horizontal floor ratings are trickier to do. When it comes to the walls, the mass timber wasn't necessarily solving as much of a problem. So what we've been able to work through now with sort of some of our team has been like, we can maybe pick up some cost savings, some capital cost savings by doing a panelized stick frame system and still get the relative same quality of a building, but do it at a slightly reduced price, which for some groups and some people or some users, especially as we get into more and more of a volatile economic environment of late, has been another really great tool in our tool case. Some projects are still staying the way of full mass timber because either due to a tight, narrow site or some other rationale that the groups come up with, it still makes sense. But again, we're just always open to and looking for that feedback loop on our work where it's constantly being informed, not just from the design, but specifically from that full integration of design, build, and client operation feedback loop.
And we have found in the case for 1620 Main Street East, pursuing Passive House certification, the nature of design assist for mass timber prefabrication dovetails well into the certification process in the sense that the basis of design was set early days during the RFP stage, and our typical wall assembly is true in construction almost to the same dimensions as it was established a year prior. And it really speaks to the nature of mass timber being inherently airtight and affording those continuous outboard insulation, and then making the choice to use the thermal bridge cladding clips.
So from my experience, CLT or mass timber is not necessarily the cheapest option. So, but since you're making it work for these housing projects, I'm wondering if, because it's so much faster, if that makes, or first of all, do you have the same experience in terms of cost? And then second, if you do, does just the increased speed in construction make up for the cost premium?
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of stigma or perception, yes. Mass timber has always had that. I mean, it's one of the things about it that people love is, whether it's being used in high-end residential or hospitals or university buildings, it always had that association of a higher-end product. And that was absolutely how we first got into the interest in using it. I think what specifically a lot of our housing focus, I mean, we have done high rise, we've done, again, a variety of different scales, but particularly when you talk about mid rise and that missing middle, that people so often refer to, we've done a lot of study of that and work in that world, particularly over the last, I'd say, 10 years. And, there's a reason why, particularly in a North American environment, you don't see a lot of that missing middle. And it's because the way that the construction industry is structured, it's built on efficiency. You need to have that efficiency to drive the costs down. We're not we don't have that luxury of having sort of European or Scandinavian environments where there's that just more appreciation for architecture policy or investment in that type of housing. So through our lens, it's always been, it's got to be efficient. So mass on the high end, for example, or high density, high rise type residential, you have the economy of scale to invest in more robust structural systems, the cast in place concrete or precast concrete systems or steel. And so we've seen those and understood that. Stick frame housing, so low rise, single family homes and more like what you would describe as probably tract housing or suburban developments like that. They often obviously are only using stick frame. And there's even, our building codes are structured in a way that we separate those things into part 9 and part 3. Our actual construction delivery models are separated into, you have home builders who sort of build a certain way, again, in that world. And then you have, commercial or ICI type constructors that are geared towards building a different way at a different cost with sort of different efficiencies. What's interesting about the missing middle is either side struggles at both the design and the construction execution level when they try to come into the middle. So the home builders who come and try to design, again, whether it's stacked towns or mid-rise apartment-based housing, they struggle and butt up against, the stick frame, when you're trying to detail things and get those horizontal sound and fire separations and some of the other, just little bit of add-on complexity to the buildings, they struggle with their systems to deal with effectively. Same being said, when you have the commercial used to doing more high-rise or larger scale with economy of scale, trying to take those systems and scale them down and using them in small scale or infill applications, they really struggle in terms of getting those costs down to the level that they need to be to make the pro formas for the projects viable. As we started to get to know more about mass timber, understand the fabrication tolerances, understanding the product itself and how it operates and how to optimize it, and do that in a way that could be compared apples to other systems. So all of that was part of our education. Again, some of the GC Wood grants and the testing and the prototyping and, building all these relationships specifically with, we have Element 5 as a local manufacturer. Understanding those things has allowed us to exploit the values, not just for speed, but also for efficiency. Understanding that a panel is, about can go up to about 3 times wider, but, close to 12 feet, can go almost 3 times as wide as a precast plank. And then they can go about the same length and shipping restraints all being about the same. That automatically tells us like, okay, so if we design this in a way, we can have 1/3 the number of picks of a precast building just because the panels are bigger and because they're also lighter, they're about 1/3 lighter, that all sort of works out. And the cost. So once you start paying attention to those sorts of things, which we've really strived hard to do, it's not to say, again, if we get this all the time where a lot of our mass timber suppliers or fabricators, they have people come to them and say, oh, can you just price this building for me in mass timber? And then, of course, the pricing is going to come back more. And they say, no, you have to look at it as a design-led process where you say, okay, we are going to design this in a way to actually optimize and take advantage of the system and its qualities to exploit and squeeze some of those efficiencies out of it. And I will just say that because of a lot of those properties with mass timber, we see it as this being wonderful solution, particularly for that missing middle solution. And I think so far we're starting to prove that out.
Yeah, it's definitely not a coincidence that 1620 Main Street East is modest in form. The floor plate is essentially a rectangle bookended by exit corridors, and the panelization that Matt's speaking to, structurally being able to test that out during our research and development when we received that GC Wood initial funding, it allowed us to build a tight-knit bond with the local manufacturer and design assist, but also the structural engineers on the team. And we're able to have that flexibility to go from studio 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, up to 3 bedroom, and then also make it barrier free. And so all of that legwork that goes into every single building is unique, but we have that basis of design each time that we're going into these prototypes. And then also with the factory tolerances, yes, it's pretty crazy to think that we're talking about millimeters, like down to the millimeter when we were coordinating windows. But that efficiency and factory design, you really get the savings in labor. As Matt had mentioned, that YWKW, the installation or the erection of the structure was done in 20 days.
And Christina, can we back up just a bit? Just give us some more of the basics of 1620, like what size it is, how many units, and also where it is in the phase right now. And tell us a little bit more about the timeline for producing 1620.
Yeah, 1620 Main Street East. It's in Hamilton, Ontario, and it is a 6-story high mass timber passive house project that is under construction at the moment. Earlier on this summer, in end of May, June, and early July, we completed the mass timber installation, and now we're at a point where we're starting to build up the wall assembly, and we're anticipated to do our first air test in early October. 1620 Main Street East, I believe, is 42 units. I always mix this up. Yeah, 42 units.
Yep.
And did you have anything to add?
Nope.
Okay.
That's good.
Great. And when is the anticipated occupancy? And approximately when did the project start? Did you start design on it?
So, yeah, I guess the early stage, it was a project that did come out for RFP. So that's another thing to note about actually all of these rapid housing projects. They were all RFP based, and particularly design build RFP, which meant these organizations came out and said, we've got this funding, or we think we've got this funding lined up. We need someone to, in basically sort of a turnkey approach, be able to deliver this for us. And so it's I think the truest way to endorse the costing of the product or of the delivery method is that we were able to be competitive financially. These weren't projects that were handed to us as some sort of, again, prototype or research based development. They were market tested. And so in this case, I want to say it was,
I think it was January
of 23.
Yeah,
January of 23, we would have put together, it was the team at Community Hamilton Housing, we would later learn, had toured our other successful projects for YW in Kitchener, seen what we had done. This project was actually a phase 2 project, but they did make a change in the team for this phase 2 building on the same site. Not because they were having any problem. I mean, phase 1 is happening and active and under construction. But I think they were just really intrigued by what we had been able to do with our delivery model and our system. And so when they opened it up for groups to come in, it was for us a natural fit that we were going to be able to put in our solution. So we were able to very quickly with our team put in our proposal based on a design that we were confident we could execute on. That proposal, as Christina's referenced to, did have some flexibility in terms of unit mix, unit type. Then we were ultimately awarded that project. And then from that point, actually did continue to do some design development on a number of different items. For example, we originally had no basement, and our sort of speed of construction model was on this missing middle is let's do slab on grade. We can get in there. We don't have to spend a whole bunch of time doing a big carbon iceberg down on the bottom or just spend all that time down below grade. In this case, however, on this Hamilton project, we did get some geotechnical information back that the soils under the building were not very good and needed to be shipped off site anyways. So instead of shipping those off and then having to absorb those costs of bringing new soils in, they actually did have the need for more storage, and that allowed them to keep more units in the above grade building. So some of their amenity and storage requirements, we were actually able to roll into a basement. Again, that was one of those adaptive changes that we made over time. But ultimately, the project itself, the only delay we've faced that's been sort of out of our control was, unfortunately, in the city of Hamilton, they had a sort of a viral attack that shut down some of their systems which was really unfortunate for the project overall because it did create some delays. But otherwise, things have been pretty seamless. And again, from the Community Hamilton Housing themselves as a client group, they've just been wonderful to deal with and work with. And even at the municipal level, there's been so much great support that we've received from the City of Hamilton on the project that it really has been a true testament to the success of our team-based approach.
Yeah, as far as timelines go, that RFP was January 2023. We took, I believe, 7 or 8 months to get the drawings to construction document phase. And then from there, it was an extended approvals coordination phase, which allocated sufficient time for us to get things in place, such as moisture mitigation plans. And we completed the majority of our shop drawing submittals so that the team was ready to go shovel in hand in late spring in April to lay down the foundations and then go into the mass timber installation. So we're slated to reach substantial completion spring 2025.
So I just want to add too that the Rapid Housing Program, although on the first round, this project is on round 3, I believe, and we were actually on our first project, they had a 12-month window. We were actually able to meet that 12-month window on that project, again, because we really almost reverse engineered our design to make sure we could do it with our team, Little Blamey Construction and a number of others. That no one else could do. The program was really struggling to meet that timeline because no one could really get a sense of how to actually do it or how we had done it. So they have since elongated it to 18 months for the rapid delivery, which is why we're still definitely in line with this project and going to meet those targets. And the other thing I just want to note though is that the passive house aspects, that upgrade, did create I would say some time complexity. And extends the schedule a little bit. Obviously, that is a big investment. And also just from a capital cost, there was a significant increase that I think most of us, familiar with passive housing, what goes into it, would acknowledge, some of those, I think important. And if you have that capital to invest in it, is obviously worth it to an organization who, has a number of units and a number of housing asset inventory and sees things and evaluates decisions they make based on 50 to 100 years, not, a sales cycle or a 5-year mortgage sort of lending window. So that was also tied in and part of this project, which has been interesting and informative for us.
Could you talk a little bit about what were the challenges in meeting the passive house performance target and what changes you made between this design and your last project?
Yeah, I think one of the issues, which I think anyone listening in that is working on a passive house project in North America, the supply for windows that's here now. There's certain challenges with getting passive house certified doors, washer and dryers that also operate within the realm of affordable housing, and the unique challenges of a coin-operated passive house dryer.
Ventless, the heat pump ventless. And that's for sure both operationally and capital costs to get those ventless heat pump based dryers, not only spec'd and working, but also having even the operations side comfortable that their tenants are actually, that they're going to be acceptable. Things like that, some of those technology advancements are things we're seeing. If people used even a dryer or a mechanical unit that's heat pump based 2 to 5 years ago versus today, you're going to have a much different experience. And we're starting to see as that technology picks up and is rapidly improving, we're having to balance that off versus, again, some of the stigma and operational experiences that groups have. So that was definitely one.
But as far as an opportunity, I'm impressed that there's like a YouTube channel that I watch, and it's a Seattle realtor, and she was talking about this condo that had Euroline high performance windows. And so that's starting to get into the North American psyche of it's a worthwhile investment to have high performance building envelopes when you're investing that much in your home.
Yep. Another big one for the passive was, a lot of times, depending on the scale of a project, it's usually around the 100 unit threshold is when you can start to discuss and start to see the optimization of going to a centralized heating and cooling system and ventilation system versus having individual unit based. On our early stage projects through this rapid housing funding, we did do unit based individual, which can keep your costs down, and more importantly, a lot of the complexity of the unit down significantly. The downside to it, of course, is again the number of penetration becomes exponential with every unit requiring it. So definitely on this one, even though it still had a relatively lower scale of a building, it's a smaller building by contrast to hitting that threshold, even in mid-rise of 100 units plus, or multi-phase buildings being able to take advantage of centralized HVAC systems. In our case, we had to invest in that centralized system still and particularly for the ventilation and some of those ventilation requirements that come with passive house. That was definitely a big challenge that had to be overcome, but one that we were able to deal with very collaboratively with our actual mechanical partner on the project, both design and the actual builder and installer, who has been fantastic and a key part of the team.
Looking forward, is the Rapid Housing Initiative finished now, or are there still projects being developed under that initiative?
There's a number of different, I'll call it programs or levers that actually all levels of government, but particularly in this case, federal government, have out right now to try and just spur and keep it going. There isn't, I don't believe currently, the next round of rapid housing hasn't been announced, but, as is the case with any, political initiative, if you have something and it's successful, you typically keep it going. So I mean, whether or not, again, it's modified, rebranded, what have you, I think the general success that they've had of this program will be and is carrying on in some form. I think one of the things about this, it was actually a grant, and it did bring with it, it was pretty targeted to certain groups that would fit the mold. I don't think you could have other sources of financing associated. So it had to really be the right fit. They really tried to uncomplicate it financially as much as possible on this program. And a lot of the other programs that they're having now that we're working with, both with non-for-profit and market rate housing supply groups, developers. There are other programs out there that all have some element of either affordability, sustainability, or accessibility. Those are the three main, levers that seem to be being pushed at a political level, which tied to this funding, which we think is great, because those are the same alignments that we have, particularly with sustainability and accessibility.
Are there any future projects that you want to mention that you're working on that are related to this one? Because you mentioned this was the fourth iteration, I think, or fifth iteration of your design. Are you taking that forward into another project?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the plan. I think we are really excited about some of the projects where we're even looking to adapt this delivery model again. Ilka, you brought up the hybrid models of stick frame wood and mass timber. What's really exciting about that is the ability to still have it be panelized, prefabricated off-site and brought together and put up with a lot of speed. There's also a different scale that we're now starting to get into in terms of granular. So stacked townhouses, which have been even maybe more plagued by some of the inefficiency of neither side of the housing construction world being able to come together and do it efficiently. We've actually now been implementing that into a standardized stacked town delivery model, which even talking to home building framers and some of the people responsible for doing the fire ratings on these stacked towns, it's like a total pain point for them. And so this same system we're now adapting in a standardized and very repeatable way, almost that kit of parts type approach to stacked town housing, which is again a very popular typology right now that we're seeing a lot of uptick in the market for, especially in these sort of volatile times. And so us, again, being able to build that toolkit of all different types of housing that we can keep feeding into the market in a sustainable and efficient and prefabricated way. That's great. And the other one is that I have to respond back to a colleague, another architect working out of Toronto, Conrad Speckert, who's done some great research work on single stair exits in small missing middle development and infill development. So we're actually working with him as one of 10 collaborators across the country who are looking to try and put forth a alternative solution application for a building design, a housing design that accommodates a single stair exit for the group. And there's, again, it's almost a European based or Scandinavian based model that you take of how you can create still very safe, very accessible environments, but do it in a way that isn't belabored by some of the out of date code that we have here in North America. So again, within that, we're really hoping to come up with these really great solutions utilizing the efficiencies of mass timber and layering on as much high performance design or passive house design as we can into any given project, but doing it in a really both economical and efficient and repetitive way, where you can still, again, have adaptations based on program user requirements or even aesthetic. It's obviously important in our urban environments to not have the same monotony. We don't want to have those cookie cutter looking housing stock around us, but it is nice and important to have those, to make sure we're doing the important things the same or doing it right every time. And repetition is sometimes a way to do that in the most efficient way, and then look for ways to create character for any given building, more with simpler ornation or articulation or fenestration.
So you're talking about repeatability and standard details, and which absolutely totally makes sense, right? Otherwise, you can't really become more economical. But so the architecture design is one thing, right? But you also have the production design, and they go hand in hand. And the production design, I mean, that's a big, big deal on the manufacturer's side. Is that like how far do you as an architecture office go with standard details? Do you take on some of the production design, or do you keep working with the same manufacturer to keep to be able to repeat the same process?
Oh man, well, I wanted to get to this too. I just didn't know if we were going to have time. So I really, really appreciate the question. But one thing I was going to say that is in line with answering this question is we've seen ourselves over the years as trying, we consider ourselves as agnostic to the system. I mean, it sounds like all we want to do is mass timber all day, every day. And it's not completely untrue. We really love the system. But when I speak, and when we've been at conferences, particularly that are timber related, I'm always quick to say we are agnostic. It is about finding the right system for the right delivery. And on that end, about 7-8 years ago, we got heavily involved, even before this mass timber housing solution really came to be. We got heavily involved with some local volumetric modular steel chassis based housing providers. They had locations in the States, facilities in the States, and then they again came to this part of the world and started up. And again, through some of our network and some of our interests, we were able to form a really good relationship. We actually did, for one of our non-for-profit clients, we did a sort of another prototype housing, which was a backyard ADU in the back of one of their group homes. When we were able to create, space for 2 more of the people they support in the backyard. And those were full finished volumetric steel boxes that we shipped over, that literally got craned over top, plunked into place, sort of turnkey finished boxes. And so what I say that is, that when the Rapid Housing Initiative program actually first came out, they were expecting more of those. They were expecting these finished boxes. What they didn't at a federal level really have knowledge of is, even though they'd seen some prototype projects, including ours, they didn't understand that there wasn't an industry to support that yet. And not only that, even from our own experience, although volumetric completed finished boxes where you can have the furniture and the chairs and the towels on the shelves and everything done sounds amazing. And it is. It's the idea of it is great, is that we're not quite there in terms of our ability to actually execute that on scale. Because if anything goes wrong in that system, and we had 2 chassis, there's been other projects where there's 200 or 2,000. And if the whole idea is to get to the point where you can have warehouses full of them, if something's wrong with that, if the detailing or the execution or the way that they plug and come together isn't right, it's wrong across like a really magnified scale or amplified scale that causes massive problems. So I think we do have to, not make sure we have to walk before we run, I think, and look for that iterative progress that we can do confidently, because as we said at the beginning, we can't afford for our prototypes to fail. Our prototypes have to be successful housing models that are still sustainable and have long-term benefits. But we do have to just look for that incremental increase. So I think within that, having this interest in modular and prefabrication worlds, understanding who the players are, who the fabricators are, and what they can do, and really working with them integrally on each project and making sure that whatever you're putting forward is solving the conventional problems of the project. That's basically our mission and our goal, because it is so far led to a lot of success. And that is, if you have a client like we've been fortunate to have here with Sydney Hamilton Housing on Passive House, if that is part of their mandate and part of the problem they're trying to solve, then we're there to do that. But if it's not, we also have to be open to looking for what tools, pre-manufacturing, modular, high performance, otherwise kit parts that we're just solving the problem. Does that make sense? I hope that answers the question. It was a great question.
Great. Well, Matt and Christina, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And it's an exciting project, and we look forward to its completion.
Well, thank you so much for the platform to discuss our office and this project as well. We're super excited about it and all the future projects in our computers right now. I was going to say on the books, but they're inside the computer.
On the boards.
And that was Christina Boyer and Matt Bolen of McCallum Sather. Really enjoyed that conversation, Ilka. Let's go to you first. What was sort of main takeaway?
So for me, the main takeaway is really to learn about how they kind of approach the projects, but first how they learn about the system. So they've been doing quite a bit of research and exploration into like mass timber construction methods, and they actually got funding from GC Wood Research Development Proposal, and they were ready to really meet the Rapid Housing Initiative that was put out by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So by meeting or by learning about the system up front, really shows that you can't just kind of jump into a new innovation and expect it to just work right away. So you really have to spend some time and resources to learn about those innovations, to be able to really use them in an effective and cost-effective way. So I thought that was really, really important to note.
Yeah.
In that interview.
And I think Matt explained a good challenge with that, is that identifying that houses aren't widgets, but you're prototyping, but every prototype needs to work. And that's a really good way of putting it, because we talk about sort of iterative design, and if you're designing something that you can prototype, and if it doesn't work, it's fine, you go back and change it. But when you're doing a house, you don't really have that flexibility, and it's good to recognize that each iteration is a prototype. But unless you've got unlimited budget, which none of us do, it's got to work. So it's still going to be useful as a building, even if you're going to maybe do something better next time. So I thought that was really interesting. A couple of terms that I picked up on, one from Christina, which was building craft. It was mentioned early on, and I really like that idea of the craft of not just building but also design, and thinking of that concept of mastery, which is just something I've been thinking about a lot at the moment, as we're trying to encourage people to think of building and trades as a really viable career path. And the other one, Matt mentioned late in the interview, he calls the basement's a carbon iceberg, which I hadn't heard before, but I quite like the idea of
I loved that term. Yeah,
it's sort of
carbon iceberg,
because it's a lump of concrete that's hidden underground, and contributes a lot to the embodied carbon, which I guess when you're building largely in mass timber, that can become a pretty significant piece of the upfront carbon if you're pouring all this concrete into the ground. So hadn't heard that term before, but really liked it. Zach, anything else from you?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One, building on what Ilka was talking about with the learning and the value and the power of learning, both in terms of how useful and important it is to learn about these systems and be able to apply them, but also the value of iterating. I think that's something that Matthew just talked about it too, but both Matt and Christina were emphasizing how important the being able to do a bunch of reps essentially and it's a real, both of those themes are a nice parallel also to between mass timber and passive house design and delivery. And on that note, I also felt like there was a real strong parallel when Matt was talking about, hey, can you take this current design and make it mass timber? Now, how much does it cost? And his observation that when you do that, you can't just tack mass timber on, but you need to look at the ways that, take advantage of the efficiencies that mass timber can bring and the savings that mass timber can bring in some places, recognizing that may be more expensive in other areas. And the exact same principles apply to passive house and applying passive house to a design. And also, there's a challenge there of applying these important approaches to building late in the process as well. So it was, I think, cool to see those similarities between two otherwise very different things, mass timber and passive house.
So I just think that this speaks very much towards the role of the architect too. Like the traditional role of the architect has to change a little bit too, where they do have to learn the system in order to adjust the design towards the efficiency of the system. So it's not just the architect as the big designer and then the builder just kind of goes and tries to build it however they can. It's more, and I think that's why I was asking towards the end of the interview, the question about production design and how far they as an office typically take the design, because I think that's a very interesting conversation about like where's the line, and I think with systems like this, the line becomes a lot more blurry between the architect and the builder, because both have to really again learn the system and invest into it before it really can become successful.
And I think there was discussion there about the cost and figuring out how to make it cost effective over time, which I mentioned it was for, financially competitive through the RFP process, which is really impressive. I'd like to do a quick shout out to I guess some of the funding that enables projects like this, and we talked about the program, the mortgage program in Canada, which these are substantial projects. There was a talk of $2 billion to provide 20,000 houses, and it seems like there's some pretty forward-thinking initiatives in that part of the world that allow projects like this to happen. And it kind of highlights the need for housing, which is, I don't think it's unique to Canada. We're facing very similar issues here. I know that lots of other parts of the world have similar issues. So to be able to support the need for housing quantity with the quality of Passive House, I think it's fantastic. And I think we're going to see more of that. Hopefully that is the focus of this little series, to talk about how we rapidly increase the supply of houses. So we've got a few more interviews lined up on that theme. Awesome. All right. Any other closing thoughts on that?
Oh, it's a great interview.
Mm-hmm.
Good work.
Yeah, thank you, Ilka, and thanks to Mary in her absence. All right. Moving on. We've got a few things coming up, Zach.
We do. So this week on Passive House Accelerator Live, we have a construction tech episode, the first construction tech episode of the season. We'll be joined by Ed May, who will be presenting maximize the value of your passive house models. So please join us for that. And then October 1st, we are launching the Reimagine Buildings Collective, our membership community, where we bring together building professionals who want to step up and tackle climate change so that we can create the healthiest buildings with the smallest carbon footprint, deliver them cost effectively and headache free, sell their benefits so they get built, and make a good living while doing it. So we hope that listeners will join us at the Reimagine Buildings Collective. We'll have more about that soon. And then on October 18th, we are presenting a special Reimagine Buildings conference called How to Decarb. So we'll be going into embodied carbon, operational carbon, building electrification, clean energy, existing buildings, equitable access, all sorts of stuff, how to land your first project, how to develop your first project. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then just for your calendar, looking forward to the next Reimagine Buildings conference. That'll be December 6th. Both of these are online, of course. That's going to be the Carbon Storage Conference that we're presenting with Chris Magwood of RMI. So lots of fun stuff ahead. And of course, we have all sorts of other exciting things going on in the community, including the pro seminar that FIAS is presenting in Providence, Rhode Island, which is October 21st to 23rd. And then we have the big NESI conference happening this fall. We have Green Build happening in Philly in November. And that is a special event this year because FIAS is a key piece of it, and all sorts of other events. So check out our events calendar on the Passive House Accelerator website to see more.
Awesome. So much going on. I'm going to head off to Wellington very shortly to the New Zealand Passive House Conference, where I'm going to catch up with Lloyd Alter and a bunch of other previous guests. So I will report back on that next week. But until then, have a great week, and we'll be back on the Passive House podcast.